So in this video, we're going to talk about standard position, quadrantal angles, and coterminal angles. So let's just talk about first what is or when is an angle in standard position. So this is referring to the x and y axis on a graph. And so in standard position, the angle is in standard position if the initial side is on the positive axis. So I've explained initial side in another video, but I'll just kind of review it here. So standard position, so I've got my graph. So my initial side starts on the x-axis, and then my terminal side can end wherever else. So it could end here or it could end here, whatever you want, okay? All right, so let's talk about angle type now by quadrant using this idea with standard position. So my initial side is here in the positive part of the x-axis. So if my terminal side ended up somewhere in here in quadrant 1, then we know that the angle measure would be between 0 and 90 degrees. If my terminal side ended up somewhere over here, then the angle measure would be between 90 and 180. Continuing on, if my angle came down to here, this would be between 180 and 270. And then finally, the last one would be between 270 and 360 degrees. Okay, so remember, you start here and then you swing this way to get these angle measures. So again, I talked about this in another video, so just kind of reminding you. Okay, now angles in standard position whose terminal side lies on the x-axis or the y-axis is what's known as a quadrantal angle. So this would be like 90, 180, 270, 360, and you could actually just keep going with this if you wanted. So if I start here, this would give me 90. And then if I continue on, if I come this way, this would give me 180 degrees. So notice that the terminal side now is on one of the axes. So continuing around, 270, and so on and so forth. So if I went all the way around, you know, this would actually be like a 360-degree angle. That's the way that we would look at it. Before I go any farther, I do want to just mention there are different ways to think about angle measures, so context kind of matters. So let's pretend I have like this angle here and I want to measure it. So it could be that you are looking at angle measure this way and I want to know what is this angle here, or it could be this way. And so this way, this is the way that we think about with standard position, what we've kind of been talking about. So you've got your initial side and your terminal side. It depends on the problem as to which way you want to measure it. However, whenever you hear standard position, when you hear that phrase, that is always talking about then, or always assuming we've got our initial side and then we go this way, and we're always interested in this way for our angle measure. So now let's talk about what makes two angles coterminal. So these are really angles that just differ by a full rotation. So a full rotation is 360 degrees. So let's build this up. So I've got my initial side of the angle, and so I come up here, let's say I've got a 45-degree angle. So to make a coterminal angle, I make this full rotation, and so now I have a new angle found by taking that 45 degrees, I add 360 to it. And so now this angle would be 405 degrees. And so these two would be the coterminal angles. So that's all that means. So one question I could ask about this is find the least positive measure that is coterminal with these two angles. So this would be something that you have to play around with a little bit. So we're looking for the least positive measure. So if I start with 715, if I subtract 360, so I subtract a full rotation from it, I get 355. So notice if I were to subtract 360 again, this would become negative. So I can't subtract again in this case. Now if this were, say, 375, I would subtract 360 again. So, but this would be the least positive I could get. Now with negative 80 degrees, in this case, I'm going to add 360 to it. And in doing this, I get 280. And so now, once again, this is the least positive measure. So that's as far as we can go with that. Okay, so now let's talk about how to find all angles that are coterminal with 45 degrees. The idea behind this is that you just really want to keep adding increments of 360 degrees. So if you wanted to find all angles that are coterminal, all you have to do really is add like 360n and choose your n. So what I want to do is I just want to show you like how does this formula work? How do we read this? So I have this table. So I've selected a couple different n's and I want to just find the angles that are coterminal with 45 degrees using that formula. So for instance, if I start with 2, so what I would do is I put the 2 in for n, so I would complete this calculation here. And so that's going to give me 765 degrees. Now what about 0? So 0, if I plug that in, so now 360 times 0 is just 0, so it's just 45 degrees. So this would be the situation where you have no rotations, okay? And then if I go in the negative direction, what would this become? So 45 plus 360 times -1, this would be negative 315 degrees. Okay. So let's talk about coterminal angles then with the quadrantal angles. So just what would those look like? So you could use that same formula. And you remember, you could think of this as positive or negative. I wrote plus or minus here. I probably could have just written plus, I guess. But things that would be coterminal with 0 would be like plus or minus 360 degrees or plus or minus 720 degrees, etc. And then for 90 degrees, so I dropped that minus sign here. I guess it's kind of confusing. So let's just think of it like this. So this would be how we think of anything that was coterminal with 90 degrees. So that would be things like negative 270, 450, etc. For 180, so same idea, right? I add that 360n. So just to give you some examples of what's coterminal with 180 degrees, that'd be negative 180 and 540. And then for 270, some example angles that are coterminal with that would be like negative 90 degrees or 630 degrees. And so that's kind of your quick overview of what those things are. So if you found this helpful, consider liking the video, or if you have any questions about it or suggestions, you can leave a comment. Consider sharing with a friend or subscribing to the channel. And otherwise, that's it for this one, guys. So I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.